I present to you Tom Bombadil for the first time in a live action adaptation. He's going to be in season 2 of The Rings of Power, and this is him right here. I read the books a long time ago, but from what I remember, Tom Bombadil is this like eccentric, quirky, kind of happy-go-lucky character. He's very different than the other characters in Middle-earth. And that's partly the reason why Peter Jackson didn't include him in the movies, even though people love Tom Bombadil, right? It's because he didn't drive the plot forward in any way. So I'm curious to see how they're going to include him in the Rings of Power, because this article, not only is it showing us pictures of Tom Bombadil, we're going to get notes from the showrunner explaining how they're portraying the character in the show. So I'm very curious about that. But this is him right here. And you can see the inspiration, right? Like this, look, this is Tom Bombadil, right? He's smiling from brim to brim. Look at him. He's got that bright blue cloak. He's got the yellowish looking boots. He's got the feather in the hat. You can sort of see that here, but everything was just toned down to be a bit more realistic. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Right? Because Tom Bombadil, from what I remember, he's an eccentric character. This doesn't look eccentric, you know? This doesn't look like quirky, and you know what I mean? And he's not smiling. But again, this is just a picture. This is one screen cap. So let's look at what the showrunners had to say about the character. There's a reason why he hasn't been in prior adaptations, because in some ways he's sort of an anti-dramatic character. Payne tells Vanity Fair. He's not a character who has a particularly strong agenda, which is why he didn't really push the characters in any particular way. He observes drama, but largely doesn't participate in it. In the Fellowship of the Ring, the characters kind of just go there and hang out for a while, and Tom drops some knowledge on them. Yeah, okay. And knowledge that's not particularly relevant to anything that they're doing or about to do. So there we go. So there we go with the showrunners explaining why he wasn't in the Peter Jackson movies. And this is a closer picture. That does look like that is a feather. That is a feather on his head. We got the reddish beard. We got the bluish cloak. It's more gray than anything. But I mean, if you look at Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, he was supposed to have like a blue hat. He didn't in the movie, and nobody really. Not many people complained, you know. But let's see. We'll see how he's portrayed. Okay, he can be a force for good, but he is challenging to integrate dramatically in that he doesn't have an agenda. So why are we adding him in here, right? It's just a side story. Why are we adding him in here? He's not serving the plot in any significant way. He's not driving forward and pushing people to arrive in any particular end. That's exactly what Peter Jackson said. Oh, look at this. Even Tolkien said Tom Bombadil is not an important person to the narrative. So why are the showrunners including him in here? Maybe just because fans really wanted to see Tom Bombadil in the on screen. He has no clear dramatic function that would justify his inclusion in a really great movie adaptation. He's whimsical and magical and almost verging on silly, but also has the wisdom of ages and the music of the spheres and deep emotional wells of ancient history and myth. And his conception and function are tied to Norse myths and have deep roots in European fairy tale. I think the way they can get away with adding Tom Bombadil is, I mean, we talked about this in my previous video on Rings of Power. They only have the rights to Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. They don't have much to go on for the Second Age. So the story they're telling is not an adaptation of anything. It's not an adaptation of the Silmarillion or anything that actually happened in the Second Age, because guess what? They can't adapt that stuff because they don't have the rights to that stuff. So they can maybe give us the essence of Tom Bombadil without having to abide by what actually occurred, because they can't adapt what actually occurred. The only thing they could adapt is if Tom Bombadil is mentioned in the appendices for any amount of time, they could throw that in here. So weirdly, he's kind of the most Lord of the Rings thing in Lord of the Rings, and the first thing you would cut if you were adapting it as a film. But we have the advantage of a television show, and hence we are going to find a way to tap into that. Okay, so what is this way? Tolkien described Bombadil as a natural pacifist view, which always arises in the mind when there is war. But also he believed the character would tip the scale of fate in favor of the hobbits and their fellowship as they stood against the forces of evil in the eastern portion of Middle-earth. Ultimately, only the victory of the West will allow Bombadil to continue or even survive. Nothing would be left for him in the world of Sauron, Tolkien wrote. And that was the key. That was the key for the Rings of Power showrunners. We started thinking, what does he care about? And how can that be a doorway to drama? We know he cares about the natural world and how he is a helper. He's not going to push you, but he will help you. And so traditionally, he lives in this place called Withwindle, which is this sort of almost enchanted forest. For the series, Payne and McKay took the liberty of giving Bombadil a second home on the outskirts of the region Rhûn. In our story, he has gone out to the lands of Rhûn, which we learn used to be sort of Edenic and green and beautiful, but now is sort of a dead wasteland. Tom has gone out there to see what happened as he goes on his various wanderings. Again, they've taken the liberty. This is not an adaptation, guys. This is not an adaptation. Remember that. The actor who's playing Tom Bombadil is Roy Kinnear. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but let's hear some thoughts from him. I was really interested to see how they were then going to process the character through the prism of their eyes and the way that they see the show developing. There's this sense of huge experience, huge openness, huge empathy, and having gone through so much that he knows it's the small things that are important. That felt actually quite domestic, felt quite reachable in terms of my understanding of who he was. His boots are yellow, the jacket is blue, and he's got a feather in his hat. So all the main beats were hit. Let's scroll back up to this picture here. You can see the boots are yellow. I mean, they're kind of like a light tannish, but they're yellowish. They're yellowish. He does have the red hair. He does have the blue jacket. He does have the feather. It's just everything is toned down a bit. It's not as bright as I was expecting. He compared Bombadil's flamboyant style to the way a child dresses. My daughter is 10. For a year and a half, she wore a sheep hat through the school day and through the hottest summer. It was just the face of a sheep with big, long, woolly straps around the side. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. So he's that's funny. The other and you can see that if you look at this, you can see that childlike flamboyantness in Tom Bombadil. So that's cool. He sees it that way. And children are sort of are separated mentally from the rest of the world. So that could actually work in his performance. The other main inspiration for his Tom Bombadil came not from the freshness of childhood, but from the permanence of extreme age, more geological than biological. The big thing was, how is he going to talk? There's a lot of different dialects and accents going on throughout the show, and I wanted him to be somewhat distinct from those, Kinnear says. But I also wanted to choose an accent that felt old, that was British, but felt like the oldest part of Britain. So it looks like Tom Bombadil is going to have a Cornish accent in this adaptation. I think that's fine. As Season 2 of The Rings of Power gets underway, Tom Bombadil offers aid and comfort not just to the stranger, but also to the audience. Season 1 set the pieces on the chessboard, and in Season 2, the pieces are in motion, and it's really about the villains. You've got Sauron, who is not cloaked behind the guise of the human refugee Halbrand anymore. And the audience knows he's Sauron. So now we're watching him maneuver as he's manipulating Adar, who's another big villain of the season. Really, Tom is sort of a curiosity within the structure, because while it is darker, Tom Bombadil is singing and saying lines that could be nursery rhymes from children's poems. Okay, so he's going to be singing. So it seems like Tom Bombadil is going to be acting like Tom Bombadil. That's good. That's good. So he sort of defies the tonal shift of the rest of the season and is a real point of light amidst an otherwise sea of darkness. Okay, so they're using him as a contrast to the rest of the season, right? So it's going to be a nice tonal shift when we jump over to Tom Bombadil if the rest of the entire season is bleak and dark. Tom Bombadil brings this levity while remaining somewhat in the shadows himself. Payne and McKay have decided not to answer any questions about the character that Tolkien himself left deliberately unsolved. And I think that's awesome. That's good. That's great. As Smith puts it, perhaps the only answer to the enigma that is Tom Bombadil is simply to accept that, as Tolkien wrote in The Lord of the Rings, he is. All right, that's cool, man. That's cool. They're not going to be answering any questions. But what do you guys think? What do you think about the look of Tom Bombadil? I think maybe if the stuff was a bit brighter, that'd be good. That'd be better. But it's not bad at all, I don't think. I mean, they're hitting the notes. They got the yellow boots. They got the blue jacket. They got the feather. It's just everything is just brought down a tone, and it feels like he's going to be acting the way Tom Bombadil act. But then I do got to remind you, if you remember the way the showrunners were talking about season 1, how they're going to be respecting Tolkien's work and all that stuff. So we'll wait and see, man. We'll wait and see. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. What do you guys think about Tom Bombadil in The Rings of Power? What do you think about his look? What do you think about what they've said, how he's going to be portrayed? I mean, everything that I read here seems good. But is that what it's going to be like in the show? We'll see. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.